Welcome. So today we're doing something special. So this is Permission to Evolve, and we're doing a joint podcast with Enneagram Adventure. So Holly's kind of the bridge here. So she does both. So I'm Brandon Thielk. I'm a performance and life coach. I'm joined by Holly Deschenes and Tannah Flora. And so we're going to be getting into some topics here today around personality, why it's important to embody your values, and yeah, why that can be draining if you go against those things. So super excited to kind of hash this out with you guys and see what we come up with.
Yeah, so if you're a regular listener of either Permission to Evolve or Enneagram Adventure, I might be the familiar voice for both of those. But just as a reminder, on the Enneagram Adventure side, Tannah and I are IEQ 9 certified coaches with that Enneagram tool that we use for personal development and coaching and awareness. And so she and I like to talk about life and development through the lens of the Enneagram. But today, since we have Brandon as our guest again, we're going to talk more generally about personality and values versus things that are specific to type. But anything that is specific to type, you can think about that through the lens of your own number. Anything you want to add?
No, that was great. I love this. I'm excited. I'm going to try to not turn this into a session with Brandon. That's what I'm going to embody that. Okay.
Yeah, so specifically when we're talking about personality, I always put it through the frame of it's who we think we are. It's not who we really are. And that's an important distinction because, a lot of times we develop these habits, these ways of being, these beliefs that are primarily built on pain, which is that's not conducive to us being our best self. I always also frame it up as, these are the lies we tell ourselves. And for good reason. A lot of times, early in life, we experience painful events, and it doesn't even have to be something fully traumatic. It could just be something like my dad worked all the time and he wasn't that present, or, it could just be like kind of the normal default of there were some needs that weren't getting met, or yeah, if we're around volatile personalities, we tend to default to a lot of safety beliefs, and that really gets us externally focused on other people. That's where a lot of people pleasing starts, is I start orienting myself to other people's moods. And so I might start to form an identity that I'm a caretaker and I'm here to help and serve other people, but I'm in that process, I'm neglecting myself. And so that's really about, in that process, we're shutting down our wants, needs, desires, who we really are, because we're learning to stay safe in certain environments. Just like anything we talk about, these things can be a phase. Sometimes that phase can last our entire lives if we don't take a look at these things, because it gets hardwired into our system and we start to wrap our identity in these ideas. Framing it up with values, it's like a lot of times our values were just kind of default. It was just what we were told over and over again. And that stuff might not feel true for us. It might be what we felt like we had to believe in order to be safe as well. This work is really about getting deeper into ourselves and getting clear on, what's actually true for me, not what's practiced or what was taught to me. And so it is this deep unlearning process. And, because these things lead to disconnection from self. And then, if we take that down the road, it could be like we're living a totally different life that we don't even like, right? So it's really important to take the step back and take a deeper look at these things so we can free ourselves up to move towards things that really matter for us.
Tannah and I talk about it a lot through the lens of that your personality is the strategy that you adopted to survive your family when you were under the age of 7. Tannah, is there anything you want to add in on that kind of theory and how we talk about it?
I think the only thing that I would add is in relation to the work with you, Brandon. I remember, I think, my very first session with you, and we were kind of trying to unpack a little bit of the value stuff. As I reflect back, it was before I started working with you, I was exhausted, but I didn't really know why. And in my first session, I remember telling you, I'm like, I feel like I don't even know myself. I was so misaligned that I didn't even feel like I had the opportunity to know who that was. So it was important for me to realize that, because as I went through like each session with you, then you would recall like, well, we can see how that feels misaligned, right? And I'm like, shit. So it's like resonating really well for me in terms of the work of when I started with you, but through the lens of the Enneagram, and you mentioned it before, like the caretaker, that is tied to my number as a really good example. And me showing up as the helper is a little bit of a mask of like what I really want, need, desire for myself, which if you take the mask off, it's I want to feel loved and appreciated. So it's just owning that in a really vulnerable way it's been a little bit of a
Well, yeah, I mean, it's an ongoing journey, and your story is a common one I hear. Generally, when people come to me, they're so depleted because they've adopted they're over indexing on the helping others and pleasing and neglecting themselves. Let's say relationships are giving and receiving, and we might just be defaulting to one of those. That that disconnects us. And so it's commonly like if I'm just always attuned to other people around me, I'm gonna develop strategies and coping mechanisms in relationship to that. So that's gonna be, well, my feelings don't matter. And so then I start dissociating from my feelings or disconnecting. And so that's where we start to numb out. And we just learn to just kind of push through whatever, right? So I'm always there to help. It doesn't matter what I need, I'll figure it out. All these things have an expiration date where they lead to burnout eventually. And the thing is like a lot of the things we adopt early in life are immature strategies. It's just generalized thinking based on that level of our development. And so the thing is like if we carry that throughout our life, that is where we're going to hit the wall. But yeah, we're never going to feel appreciated no matter what. We're never going to be feel seen, heard, respected, all those things, because I'm just kind of blending into other people's moods. And so I'm sacrificing myself in that process. And I lose sight of who I am. Like I don't really know who I am anymore because I just associate with other people. And so, that's that journey back to self. That's super important. And the mature perspective is we bring in okay. So it's not just this way or that way. This is the middle ground of, in reality, if I'm serving other people from a depleted state, like I'm not giving to my fullest ability, but then I'm also depleting myself in that process. And so it's getting to the point of like recognizing, well, if I take care of myself, nurture myself, meet my needs, or have people that support me in that, I can show up fully embodied. I can show up as myself. And that's where I have boundaries with people, where I'm not overextending myself, because I know what that leads to. That leads to more disconnection. And so that says when we're connected to ourselves, we have a lot more to offer other people as a result, which makes our help much more effective. And that's saying is it's like, because if not, our attention is fixated on these ideas of like, okay, I need to do this or I'm going to get abandoned or something of that nature. Right. So it's coming from this place of pain. It's coming from this place of lack. And so we're engaging the stress response. And that really, that is what depletes us. It wears us out because I'm walking around trying to prove my worth to other people that will probably never see it. And that's really disheartening, but then it's also exhausting.
Right. And I think some people can kind of put that mask on better than others. So if I think about it through the lens of the Enneagram too, where you have people who can be perceived as inauthentic, and some people it's easier to read than others. Like the 3 is the chameleon, right? For me as a 2, and I've heard Danny, who's been on our podcast on Enneagram Adventure, talking about her life as a 2, like she can be perceived as like, is that really who she is all the time? And yes, but then when she goes home, she's like chill. Like I need to separate. But I think in the really unhealthy space, what resonates is the amount of energy that it was taking me to not only shove my own feelings and values down, while also, to your point, of absorbing everyone else's around me, and the confusion that caused of what's mine, who am I in all of this, was impacting me, I would say physically for sure. I was tired all the time. I was sick all the time. I had aches and pains that like had no rhyme or reason because I was pretty sedentary at that point. But I think it's interesting to think about it from the authenticity piece too, and what people can read coming from you. Even if it isn't for you to do the work for yourself, it's like, how can you recognize when that's happening? I've called a couple of my family members on it. I'm like, that's not real. You're not like, you don't mean that. And my sister, who's a 9 in particular, she also struggles with that same thing of what is mine and what am I doing for other people. So it's a learning curve is what I would say, but it definitely hits home in terms of the work that you do plus Enneagram. I don't know how that sits for you, Ollie.
Yeah, I was thinking through some of what you were saying, and Brandon, a lot of the work that you do is specific to embodiment, right? And allowing for that. And I think the personality piece, and Tannah and I have done episodes about this too, where it's like, don't use your personality or your type as a crutch, right? Like, don't make that your whole thing. How do you use this as a tool to develop that self-awareness? But the embodiment in the self-awareness, I think, is important. And so I am wondering a little bit if we can pivot into talking about this idea of what that embodiment really means.
Well, I'll tie it into the authenticity piece. When somebody's being fake, it might to them, it might feel like that's who they are. Once again, that's what we're kind of talking about here is they're just so disconnected that they've adopted all these masks and strategies, and that's stacked on a bunch of pain. And so when I look at the nervous system they're so suppressed, so shut down that the energy is not flowing. And so you won't feel a presence coming from that person. I always just say like, oh, if somebody's trying to convince me of something, I'm like, yeah, there's no energy behind that. That's just like your strategy in your mind, right? Where it's just like, if we're to move powerfully through life, like we need presence, and that means embodiment. That means I need to really own my energy. That also needs to be rooted in self-belief and in values, as we're talking about here. I need to know who I am and what I stand for and how I want to show up in life. And we shut those things down to stay safe. And so that's contracts the energy system. So I'm not putting out energy. There's nothing to it. I'm not able to create or generate effectively because like I'm in this protection mode. So much as like getting out of survival where we can be relaxed and at peace with ourselves. So the embodiment piece is like, I view them as emotional blocks are energy blocks where I've decided certain things about things that have happened to me. And in that place, these beliefs, they get hardwired into my system and it starts contracting and it starts locking down. And so I'm not able to have presence. I'm not able to show up fully because my default is like, yeah, I do want to hide. I want to avoid confrontation. I want to stay out of things because that's what's safe. And so when we go through the embodiment process, it's about opening these things back up so the energy can start flowing again. Because intellectually, we can read the books, listen to the podcasts, all those things. Intellectually, we can understand an idea, but embodying it is like being able to practice it on a daily basis. This is how I live. And so I need to take those concepts and I need to cement them into my nervous system and I need to be in alignment with them as well. So what we do is we work out internal conflicts. So internal conflicts is what splits our energy. If I'm moving in a direction and, I have a desire, but then I also feel like it's not safe to do so, I'm not fully committing to something. So half of my mind's here, half of my mind's here. And so the tipping, and that's why we get a lot of inaction. That's why people get stuck and procrastinate and all that stuff. It's like they don't feel like it's fully safe to move forward. There's hesitation. There's things in the background that they don't trust themselves to move forward and figure it out. So much of this work is about being okay with uncertainty and being uncomfortable because that's how we start moving the energy in a new direction, because otherwise it just gets stuck in these loops where we kind of fizzle out and stagnate. And then we start to build really strong beliefs behind that support our way of being. And that's where you'll see somebody that, makes a lot of excuses, justifies everything they do, needs to be right all the time, is because their identity is so hardwired into safety that they're protecting this self-image that really needs to fall away. And so we cling to what we know. It's about surrendering what we know in discovery of who we really are and what we don't know, the pieces of us we've suppressed and lost along the way. So we have to go on that journey to find them. So the embodiment process is like, it's reconciling the internal conflicts so that I can move forward in the direction that I choose uninhibited. So if not, I'm going to have that tension created, and then my thoughts are going to support the tension. It's going to tell me why I shouldn't do things, and because it's only trying to protect me. And so we have to go back to that place, and we have to take a different look at those situations. And can I draw a different conclusion that frees me up to align with what I really want?
Is that where some imposter syndrome comes in too? Is that more beginning, middle, and continuous throughout the process of people trying to figure out what's authentic to them, would you say?
Well, I'd say imposter syndromes where I'm actually like, I'm living the life that I've created, and I'm actually like, the things I wanted, I'm actually there, but my mind's still stuck in the past and believing I'm not there. So there's just, it's like, I'm not able to believe that I'm like worthy, because that's my default, is to just believe I'm not good enough. So it doesn't matter what my environment's telling me. It's an internal thing that I still haven't reconciled these parts of me that's trying to stay safe, trying to play small. When I go step into a room that, yeah, let's say it's with like high caliber people, I don't feel like I belong. I don't feel like I'm competent enough, all those things. Even if I've like demonstrated that over and over again, I still haven't reconciled the parts of me that are in opposition to that. And so all these situations are going to produce anxiety for you. And it's also, once again, going to filter your energy where you're not as powerful as you should be at that point. And so that's, you kind of see this in transitions where, yeah, promotion at a job, or, moving on to something different. You're just like, okay, this is new. But a lot of times we forget that, hey, like I have this all this huge track record of showing that I'm capable, because we get lost in the day to day. It's that taking a step back and recognizing like I am actually where I wanted to be. And so because I'm here, like I must actually be worthy.
That feels like you and I have done a lot of work on this topic, Brandon. I think that, and shout out to you we started working before I got an opportunity to get a promotion. And I think a big reason for my success through that process was because I had worked through some of those challenges. Where I remember a specific conversation with you leading into that, and you're like, how are you feeling? And I'm like, is that like, I'm not qualified for this, like kind of similar to the thought where I had like, I don't want to compare it to this necessarily, but similar thought of like, I have 2 children that I need to keep alive. And some days I'm like, how am I responsible for keeping 2 other humans alive, well-educated, fed, healthy, like all the things. So I think it's important though, because on my kind of work through authenticity and how I want to show up and where things came from and reconciling through all of that, you also pushed me to your point just now about experiencing those things. Because like, for example, I remember you telling me to reconcile some of the things that I needed to do. I needed to be intentional and spend more time with the people that had triggered me. And
I hate it when he says
oh
that.
my God, I'm like, no, you want me to what? But it's uncomfortable. And it's facing these different like demons and like versions of me that I've created based off of interactions with these people. And it's those moments where you act and behave differently and you see the response from those people where I've seen the biggest growth for me, like that satisfaction of I set a boundary, I didn't react in a way that I would have normally reacted or been triggered. And it is so much more freeing. I remember going to those events and feeling exhausted after spending time with those people, because I was like, this is insane. This is insane. I don't agree with any of the shit that you're saying. You upset me. You are pretentious and I hate it. But I would like shrink myself to be in that space because it was easier than living authentically through the experience of dealing with the thing head on. So I guess like a question I would have, Brandon, is for people who haven't started that work or who are similar to the place that I was in when I started working with you, maybe not incredibly sure of who they are. Like, what's the first step to figuring that out?
Yeah. So a couple things here. So yeah, in order to figure things out, we need space. We need reflection because we get caught in our patterns and we just do the day to day. That's where like journaling and prompting, really helps to be like, okay, I need to ask deeper questions because I have this surface level operating, and yeah, that's a common thing, as I move forward with the client is I'm like, yeah, you need to like go spend time with your parents. And that's for good reason. They're the foundation of our psychology, right? They taught us everything. We lived with them for so long. It's that 0 to 7 range that's so foundational. So if you're missing parts of yourself, it's probably wrapped up in those relationships in one way, shape, or form. It's kind of understanding like if I see it as through this lens of I'm trying to figure out who I am, well, I need to go confront the parts of me that I'm scared of, or the people that I blame for that. Everybody's doing the best they can with what they knew, and that's not always optimal. And so it's this idea of, self-awareness of like, my job is to go put myself in environments and see things through a different lens, like rather than me just being reactive to everything that's going on around me. I just start to see it differently, being like, oh, that's interesting that I'm reacting that way. What's that about? Right. And so we start going into the feeling and trying to understand it a little bit. And like, why do we feel like as a grown adult, like, why do I give these people so much power over me? Because that's anytime we're shrinking ourselves and exchanging in that manner, it is like I still feel like they're the authority in my life. And so I have to do what I'm told. The mask, that's what drains us is like I feel like I can't be myself in these environments, and that doesn't feel good to me. And but the trick is it doesn't really require any energy to just be you. You don't need extra energy to just kind of be, right? When I go into these things and they're draining, it's because these people are triggering me, and these are the wounds, these are the things inside me that are unresolved, and they're mirroring them to me so that I can find my way back to myself. So as an adult, I view that you don't necessarily have to have like a bunch of conversations with your caregivers and be like, hey, like this was wrong or what, sometimes that's necessary, but it's more of like, well, you're carrying these things inside you. And so a lot of times, even if they said everything you wanted them to say, like it still wouldn't feel good inside. It might feel good temporarily, but it's still like there's these foundational pieces of like, I'm in charge of my nervous system. Like I imprinted all this information in here. So it's like, I get to rewrite that anytime I want. And so I have to be able to see these situations differently. And and so when we have relationships that are challenging, it's like I'm showing up in a certain dynamic with that person. And so it's based on my expectations of them. And so, especially with our family members, we have tons of data to support who we think they are. We have a role we play in those dynamics. And so it's about changing your role. It's about, okay, yeah, that used to be the dynamic, but I'm changing. And so that says, as you do this work and as you let these things go, like sometimes it can be a little awkward. Like people don't know what to do with you because they're just like, well, like I thought I knew you. This happens oftentimes in my family where they believe things about me that probably haven't been true for like 15 years, right? It's just like they like don't even like really know who I am anymore because it's like I've shifted so much that it's just like they haven't updated their mind, and it's just like, okay, well, like they're not doing that work. It's okay. But like I don't need to get offended by that, or I don't have to have any bad feelings about that. It's just like, well, like I'm just being me. Like whatever their judgments are, that's kind of their deal, right? And our judgments are our way to try and like figure out the world around us, right? And our beliefs can be way off base. So I'm no longer going along with their script. I'm just like living mine. That doesn't really require any energy, but it does take that self-awareness of like when these things do get activated and I feel the impulse to protect myself. It's about dismantling those things because, in reality, when you put yourself in a family situation, what can actually hurt you, right? They're feelings you're afraid of. That's what it is. And that may have been coming from a very painful place. And so as we soften and unpack that stuff, you get more in tune with reality, being like, well, what am I actually fearing now?
You said a couple things that stuck out to me. One of them being you're responsible for your own nervous system. And I think about that. We talk about in work, Tannah and I do in our real lives, at our real jobs, I should say. There's a lot of this idea of accountability and personal responsibility and like trying to teach people that. But I think like at the most basic level, what you just said is that you're responsible for your own nervous system, but people have a tendency to want to blame everybody around them. So maybe we can chat a little bit about that level of personal responsibility, accountability.
Yeah, I mean, it's just there. It's unconscious. So our nervous system's so efficient. It is molded by our expectations of things, and that's why we have to venture into the unknown. Is because we have to gather new data that supports a new reality for us. That's the thing. Is it's just if somebody's once again we talked about earlier on today. It's like this external focus that leaves me like chasing and trying to fix everybody else. Okay, there's like no power in that. So any like change in other people, it's going to be because you're showing up differently, right? I'm like carrying different energy. I'm not going into the reactions. When I'm more centered, I'm able to hold my ground better and then also like guide other people better. That's why the best leaders are more calm and balanced. It's because they're not reacting to everything that happens. They see it as just like, oh, this is just what this person has going on. They're upset about it. And that's linked to their personal history. It's too much to cover, right? To be like, well, I need to know everything about this person so I know all their triggers. And so an assessment like Enneagram is an attempt to understand somebody better, but everybody's so incredibly complex that everything would fall short of a full understanding. There's so many things we don't know about somebody, but our mind makes judgments. Based on what I do know, these are the conclusions I draw. And even when I'm working with the client, based on what they're telling me, I can make certain assumptions, but my goal is to guide them to share with me how they really feel, what they really think, because that's the information they've stored. This past week, I had a session where I was like, okay, well, this client had this, and this going on. Okay, well, based on that, I would typically say somebody would start to believe these things about themselves. She's just like, no, I don't feel that way. I feel this way. I'm like, oh, okay. I took my best shot at it, but it's like we all process information differently. We're all incredibly complex. And so it's it's giving that space for somebody to explain what they're thinking to you. We're seeking to understand somebody, and that's how we reconcile relationships. It's just like my mind's telling me certain things about this person. So I'm kind of putting them in my own box. Like I have these expectations based on my interactions. And so if I take the step back and I clear the space and I come in this place of non-judgment, of just being open, now I can have different conversations with them. And in that space, when they're not feeling judged, like I'm no longer on guard, they're no longer on guard either, right? That's where people start to open up to us, is when we just allow them to be. But if I'm coming at somebody with they're a problem and I need to fix them, that's automatically, okay, I'm putting myself above them. And the dynamic is I know better than they do. And they're a problem. I'm going to try to will them into what I think is right. That's where we get all the defenses. That's where we get, okay, people are going to point the finger and blame and justify and make excuses, because it's just like we've already put them in an impossible position where they don't feel like they're safe. So now they need to defend themselves. We can't get to the place of responsibility when that whole system's engaged. We have to take a step back, clear the space. Even in working with couples, if there's big arguments, it's like, well, yeah, let's get all that intense energy out, like just kind of like yell at each other, or we'll do whatever you need to do. But eventually you're going to get tired of that because it's exhausting. And when you're able to get to that place of surrender, now we have this like new space to work with where I can actually sit centered and just listen to the other person, because these are all misunderstandings generally. It's about creating this new space to create awareness, because most people are on autopilot. They don't know why they're doing the things they're doing. They've just adapted that way to stay safe. That's all stagnated energy. That's very old. And so if we're going to transform a relationship with somebody, it's got to be getting to a centered place of non-judgment. I'm going to show up differently. I'm not going to engage with who I think this person is. I'm going to allow them to reveal who they are to me. and they need to feel safe in order to do. It's about kind of dropping our ego, needing to be right, all that stuff. I know what's right for this person. And based on if I'm seeking to understand, now it's like I have new information to work with, and now we can start to channel that in a better direction.
So, how much of some of this misalignment and like reactions that we have, the judgments and the information that we're gathering, how often would you say that some of those reactions and behaviors come from recognizing something in yourself that you're misaligned with? Because Holly does this to me. If I have a reaction to something based off of data, she'll be like, well, let me challenge you to think about it this way. What could the positive intent be? There's no positive intent here. Like, and I've heard you say it to me before too. Like, is that something that you're recognizing in that person that you don't like about yourself?
So the answer is 100% of the time. We're all trying to figure ourselves out, and we do that through relationship. We have to experience other people. Other people are mirrors for us. And yeah, so when I'm interacting with somebody and there is like harsh judgment there, it's once you start doing this work, you're, oh, well, like that can kind of play this game of, oh, I'm like better than the people that don't. But it's, well, okay, so you've progressed, you've moved past some things. And then there's this like recognition that, oh, like I used to do those things. When we grow, they always say if you don't like feel embarrassed by your life a year ago, you're not growing. And there is some like truth to that, because when we come out of something, okay, so we learned new information, we learned a more aligned way of being for ourselves, but then we look back on those aspects of our younger selves, and generally we start to feel shame. When we have shame, so step 2 is, okay, I'm doing better, but when I think about this, it makes me like cringe. So that's the shame piece of, well, now that I know what I know, it is kind of embarrassing that I used to be that way. And this happens all the time. It's the second part of healing is in getting to embodiment is forgiving ourselves. So it's like going back into the shame and being, well, I was doing the best I could, like based on my motivations at that time, that's what I thought was the right thing. And that's why we always say people are doing the best they can with what they know. As you grow and to develop, we tend to look back on the things and yeah, I feel some shame about it. And so that's like step 2 is to address that and start to smooth that out and forgive ourselves for the things we did when we were functioning from that place and acting that way, and making peace with that. And once we make peace with that, basically we've kind of completed the growth where everything's just neutral, where I could just, okay, now that I don't have shame around that idea, I'm not going to be reacting to that person that's mirroring that to me. And so then I can just be in acceptance of them. I understand it to the full depths because not only did I move past it, but then I went back and I cleaned up the shame and the embarrassment around it. So I'm no longer trying to, because a lot of times people will be like, oh, like I never used to do that, but they did. And that's the place they're in. It's like, okay, you're at step 2. Okay. And so that's okay. That's part of the process too, is to be embarrassed of who you used to be. And then, eventually we want to move past that. And then that's what opens that space of non-judgment, is because I'm no longer actually judging myself, the younger version of myself. So my path was sitting around and meditating a lot. And so me just studying stuff. And so that's one version, but there's also like, okay, through my relationships, who are the challenging people? Like, what are they showing me about myself? And that's all data that, okay, there's things within me that are tied up and unresolved. This person's showing that to me, and that's why I have a negative reaction to them. And so we just go back and we kind of rework it to find peace with it, so that it's just like, yeah, that's where you're at in life. It's okay. A lot of people feel that way around their like high school selves, right? Because it's just like, yeah, like we're really wanting to be accepted. We're really wanting to be included. That's when we often pretend who we're not the most, right? It's because like I'm trying to gain favor with other people, right? I'm trying to be accepted. And you kind of model yourself after like, oh, this cool kid, what are some things they do? And I'm going to try and be like that. That's the kind of stuff where it's just like, well, yeah, that I could have just been me all along, but I felt like I needed to do that based on where I was at in life.
We talked a couple episodes ago on it, kind of like to your point about the high school version of yourself, where so we were talking about this concept of when you're in this rebellious stage, you're acting in your stress number. And something you said triggered that memory for me because the shame tied to the behavior in stress for me is so big. I don't know if you feel that way, but I can reconcile that. So all the work that I've talked to you about where there's things that came up from that period of time, there was absolutely shame tied to that. And it ties back to this theory of who we were in that rebellious stage for me pretty deeply.
I guess there is some shame there for me when I think about that time and that rebellious stage, right? It was the fact that I put myself in situations that frankly were very unsafe because I was not saying no to anyone, right? It was all about, yeah, I'm not going to miss out on this or that. And like, okay, you say that's a good idea. Let's try it. All right, I'm going to try it. I mean, and not to go into full stories, but things that like my now adult self looks back on like, holy shit, I could have really, something really bad could have happened. I think about it more from that lens of that rebellious stage was really like pushing away safety in the idea of the fear of missing out.
Yeah, and another thing to look at is you'll see, I mean, progressions of people. Generally, it's the more it goes on, they get like more serious about everything. That's what the shame that does, because ideally we like stay in tune with kind of the child version of us. It's like playful and likes to have fun and like all that stuff. But what like the shame is like what makes us serious. I mean, like, oh, I feel embarrassed of those things, or like, yeah, how could I ever do that? So now it's just like we start to form these like these rules of like, okay, this is what an adult looks like, and this is how I need to be. And so generally you go through phases where people just really shut down their lives, and you commonly see this with people with like drinking problems or substance. It's just like, oh, like alcohol is really bad, don't touch it. It can be anything you're abusing, like it's out of balance, right? And it's like lowering your inhibitions, and you affects your decision making and like all these things. But it's just like, well, was it just the emotional pain that was going on inside you that made you behave those ways, or made you dependent on that? Is like you're trying to get relief from those feelings, and everything's kind of neutral in terms of like, well, I if I can use things in an aligned way, and like let's say I enjoy it, like a recommendation for like younger clients especially is just like, yeah, if you have like big emotional things going on, don't go get blacked out, right? Because that's all that's going to amplify, right? But does that mean you like can't party? Does that mean you can't like do talking to college kids and stuff? It's like you can do those things, but like we also want to do this work. We also want to make sure you're at peace with yourself, because if you're acting out of the pain, like that's where problems get created, and we're more apt to put ourselves in, compromised situations, do things that embarrass ourselves. A lot of that stuff's difficult to recover from. And so it's just finding like, okay, well, and then that's it. Like in my 20s, like I just like dug into all these like heavy emotions all the time. And it's just like, well, yeah, if I'm going through something really intense where I'm feeling miserable, like my answer is not to go like drink or do something to numb out. I'm just going to feel it to the fullest extent. And then when I feel better, I can go do those things and have fun again, like an actual fun, not destructive stuff. Right. So it's like, it's kind of setting things up being like, well, especially males are taught to, really suppress and avoid their emotions, and like things can kind of creep up, like when you're functioning from that place, because it's in there, just shut down. And if you're lowering your inhibitions, it's more likely to spill out. And then that's when it's kind of messy. And so it's just like paying attention to what you feel, and kind of moving through things. And and that's it. And we do go through phases, especially like high school, college, where you just might feel depressed and miserable for an extended period of time. And it's just, oh, I just want relief from this. I want to go try and have some fun. But if it's coming from that place, it's not actually going to be fun, right? So it's about like, okay, well, like there's just some emotional things I need to reconcile here, because we're setting ourselves up for, once we have like the embarrassing event or something we're not proud of, like let's say we treated somebody very poorly or whatever it is. Well, okay, those things are like way more difficult to recover from, especially if we've hurt somebody. Those are a lot more difficult to forgive. So we want to get things when they're smaller and more manageable. And so if things are really building, a lot of times I see people that are living really out of alignment, that aren't happy and living kind of recklessly. It's like a lot of times they need some sort of wake up call to stop, right? They need something big to happen to jar them. And then that's when they might turn to religion, or they might turn to different things to be like, okay, well, this actually like centers me. And so even once again, that's that journey of like, okay, I'm taking new steps, but then I also need to forgive this previous version of me, because if not, I'm just still fighting against it. I'm actually like fearing that somehow it's going to come back to haunt me the whole time too. You don't really fully move forward. And then we also become very judgmental of people that are operating that way.
A couple things stuck out to me. So you were on our podcast before, and we know you're a 7 on the Enneagram. So I would just like to highlight like the massive amount of work that I hear from Brandon in terms of the 7, like being able to feel the emotion and like not numb it out, not run away from it is like massive work for a 7. So as we think about that and think about other podcasts we talked about this on, that's huge. So I'm a little jealous of that level of work, but that's really cool to hear. And for those of you who are 7s who listen to Enneagram Adventure or know a 7 in your life, that will resonate immediately when Brandon says that.
He's also a feels like a 4, which is a whole other thing to unpack another day.
But I guess it's just things like started to click pretty early on for me so one of my biggest problems was always people that were unconscious, didn't really take responsibility for their emotions, and then just like threw it all over other people, right? So part of it was like a motivation to like not be that way. But then it's just like, yeah, when I like tried to do like kind of the normal thing and just go, oh, I'm just gonna like go do all this, I would always just like create a mess. And I'm like, okay, that didn't work. Because I was like, oh, I just need to take massive action, especially when you're like trying to build something. You're like, yeah, you just got to like keep moving forward because it's like what people tell you. And then I'm like, well, no, I'm like really not at peace with myself. I feel pretty miserable all the time. Like, why don't I just like look at that? And it's a little bit obsessive. I'm really, really like pay attention to how I feel as long as I'm awake, right? But that's the thing is like, I'm like curious. I'm like, I don't want to hold on to these things anymore. I want to feel free. And that's a primary motivator for me is like, I want to feel free in my life. I want to be able to, pivot and kind of do whatever is exciting to me and things like that. And so I don't want to get kind of stuck in, trying to protect myself or avoiding pain. It does all pass eventually, and sometimes when I first started doing like intensive work, like I would hit on some patterns and it'd be like, I would like be out of commission for like a month. I couldn't get out of bed and stuff. And it's just like really, really intense stuff. And so the more I stuck with it, like that window started to shrink, right? Where I was able to move through things a lot faster. So, generally, I still like kind of hit some stuff that's like annoying, but I'm still very functional. But that might take a little bit of while for me to like work my way through it. But yeah, most things it's, within like 5 minutes, I'm like, oh, okay, that's what it's about. And then I just like let it go. And so it's practice. It's like anything. But the more you do it, the better you get at it. And so it's about kind of bridging the gap between your conscious and unconscious mind, where, if I'm able to take a step back and get calm, like I can see what's actually going on with me pretty rapidly. And yeah, that's why I do this work, is because it's like, yeah, to me, this is like the only answer. You can solve any problem this way, because it's all like everything we want is based on us not feeling good about something. So if you just like deal with that first, it solves a lot of the external problems.
It's true. That's all true. I don't know that I've got it down to 5 minutes, but Tannah's aware of some major crash outs, so to speak, that I've had. And I think now, instead of that crash out or whatever that thing is being something that I like hang on to for, a week or something and like stew in, now I'm like, have the big moment. And then I'm like, okay, that's moving on. I'm upset because of XYZ, really. And this doesn't have actually anything to do with this specific situation. And so we're moving forward.
Well, and that's how you accelerate your growth, right? It's just the quicker I can get the message now, it's like, okay, I can move forward. And yeah, some people like never get the message. They just stay stuck in the same mindset their entire lives. And those are like, when you're on the growth path, those are like the most frustrating people, because it's just like, hey, if you could just like see this, like it's so much easier than
Right. Right.
but that's the thing is like we're not in control of that. So you have to learn to surrender control, which can be very difficult, especially, when you feel like you know better, right? It's that acceptance of everybody's at a different place, everybody's got their own journey. We don't know what the big picture is for that person. We can't even claim to know, but it's like it takes a lot of patience, and it's always whatever happens, it's like, how can I bring it back to myself? How can I just feel it and process it and move through it? Because I'm just avoiding some sort of pain, and that's why I'm trying to control this thing. And so it is about surrendering control over and over again. And when we do that, we dismantle the personality. We're surrendering the ego, which is designed to protect us. And we get back to this place of like, oh, I just like trust in life. I trust to move, like, I'll figure it out. You start to believe in yourself. You start to believe in, the universe or God or whatever you want to call it. You start to be like, well, yeah, like I trust that everything's serving me in some way. It's just data or information for me to integrate. And nothing's really that big a deal. Every problem can be solved. Sometimes it just takes a little bit longer.
It's not that serious, as they say, right?
That's the being playful again. It's like, okay, yeah, I got really serious, and maybe that was necessary, right? Maybe I needed to be really serious for a while to clean up some things, but if we're staying in super serious, that's really like against the nature of what we're doing here. It's you're here to figure out who you are, and you're here to live your life to the best of your ability. That's why, like, dogs are a good reminder, right? They're just kind of like always playful and having fun and just full of love and stuff like. So you just kind of look at nature, and you're just like, well, yeah, like it's gonna be okay. Like, I've gotten through all these other things that were 10 times more painful than this going on. So it's just like, why is this any different?
It's just that easy. It's just that easy. Oh.
Well, in some ways it is. Like, we say that jokingly, but in some ways, after you like go through this a few times, you're like, oh yeah, I made that way harder than I had to be.
Well, I learned that. So when I was pursuing baseball and stuff, it was so my mom like got into energy work, and, she's like teaching me all these things. And yeah, I was like started to make the connection with emotion. And yeah, so it was like, it really like gave me the confidence to just do anything. I'm just like, yeah, this is going to really suck, but I know I'll get through it. Because I'd go put myself in crazy situations, and then at the end of the day, I would call my mom and I'd be like, hey, this is what happened today. This is how this person responded to me. This is how it affected me. Like, we just like work the puzzle, and we did that like thousands of times. Yeah. But that was the thing, is it's just like, well, I'm in a really shitty situation. And so that's where you get really serious and you dig in, being like, okay, well, like I have to clean this up. But it's also like you're rebuilding this new version of yourself that's like shedding all the bullshit. I've always just kind of, whatever I decide to do in life, I just want to do it to the best of my ability, and I want to be great at it. And so I'm like very driven for those things. As I progress, it was just kind of like, oh, like emotions are really the key to everything. That's why people get stuck. That's why people don't, take risks. So it's just like, if you can just reconcile things within you, like you can take the steps that are needed to create whatever it is you want. And yeah, it is a puzzle sometimes. It's always guiding you deeper into yourself. And as you get to that place, that's where you get more present. And when you're more present, now it's like I step out of performing, I step out of trying to be something I'm not. And I'm just like, okay, like what is it that I really want? And that doesn't mean you like become selfish either. It just means like, okay, I have these things that are important to me. I put time, energy, and focus into them to build them, because that's what's required. And then I'm also like in tune with people around me. Is there something I can do to help? Is there something I can offer? And just really, because once you like start to heal yourself, like you want to hold that space for other people pretty naturally, because you like know what it's like to feel like in your like darkest places. And you're like, oh, I wouldn't want anybody else to feel that way. And so you're just like, if I have the ability to help guide somebody out of that, like, why wouldn't I?
Right. Oh, you guys, I feel like this is a good point to talk about the work tomorrow, and that's exciting. So, we're doing a group in-person session with Brandon, and this is the first one of these. Yeah. So, we're the guinea pigs, which feels very exciting for me. And hopefully, there will be more of those going forward. So, I'm excited about the work tomorrow. It's a full day. I'm so excited. We have some other people that we know mutually coming, and some of them were chatting with me yesterday, and they're like, yeah, I can't wait for tomorrow. I'm like, I know, you love feelings, don't you? This is going to be so exciting. But I'm super pumped about that.
Yeah, it'll be really exciting, and I'm excited to look at like what this evolves into, hopefully, and where we can go with some of this. So it should be good. I think we are at a point to like wrap this up a little bit, and usually on Permission to Evolve, Brandon gives us like his last words of wisdom at the end of these episodes, as opposed to Tannah and I, who are just like, okay, great, this was awesome. We'll talk to you later. So I don't know if you have anything you want to close on.
Yeah, I mean, it's always a pretty consistent message, but it's pay attention to how you feel. That's communicating what's going on within you. And oftentimes it's very old. Those are old ideas. Those are things that are trying to protect you. And it's also, while it's trying to protect you, it's also your signal that you need to grow in some way. So what used to conquer you shouldn't conquer you your whole life, right? Just kind of updating your mind to be, I'm capable, I can take some steps into the unknown and I'll be okay. You just look for different things that kind of point to, yeah, like things you've overcome, things that used to be hard for you, but now are easy. And that's the growth process. It's like, how can I overcome the mental, emotional blocks that my mind's telling me these certain things, but it's just trying to keep me safe. But that's what forms the mask. That's what disconnects us from ourselves. And if we start to believe those lies, that's where our life really gets off track, and then we're going to be depleted and not very happy. So joy is about finding fulfillment, and fulfillment is through progress. I want to be better tomorrow than I was today, and I want to believe in a brighter future. It's trying to figure out, what do I need to let go of that's going to free me up to move towards that brighter future. And so it's about reconciling these internal conflicts of, okay, yeah, like that was a very hard time in my life. Do I need to still believe the same things? Do I still need to carry the shame associated with it? Because that's keeping me small. That's like making me hard. That's making me pretend I'm somebody I'm not. And we all do these things. There is actually no shame in it. But if you pay attention to how you feel, and if feeling's difficult for you, it's, just spend some time in silence once in a while. Just really try to connect with your heart. And we can wake things back up. If you've numbed things out for a very long time, that doesn't have to be a forever thing, but we really need the feeling sensation to work with, because that's what gives you access to all this information. But the workshop, that's going to be a big part of what we're doing, is going through the mechanics of how all these things come to be and how to dismantle your past and how to get aligned with your future. So super excited for that.
Yeah, same. It'll be good. So Brandon, you usually also talk about where people can find you. And so there could be some Enneagram listeners who have not listened to Permission to Evolve. We would, love it if you are a listener of one podcast of the other, if you would go find and like, subscribe, comment, give us a listen. Let us know what you think on both podcasts. I will make sure the links for all of the things are in the descriptions or show notes for both podcasts. But Brandon, do you want to go through where people can find you?
Yeah, so you can just visit my website, brandonthielk.com. That's THIELK. So you can register for my newsletter. Each Monday, I send out an update on what's going on in the business and some reflection prompts for the week. And yeah, so listen to Permission to Evolve. Also find me at Brandon Thielk on Instagram and YouTube. And if you're curious about this work, you can schedule a free strategy session on my website as well. So it's just a 30-minute call where I get a sense of what you've got going on and share how I can help. So definitely reach out if you're interested.
Got anything?
Ditto. Reach out. It's the best work. I promise. It's worth all the time and energy to put it in. So excited for tomorrow, and this was great.
All right, cool, guys. Thanks. We'll
Yeah.
talk to you later.
Thanks.